but you need to put yourself in a position where that luck needs to happen. And that's where going to these events, meeting these people, speaking to people, networking. Always comes back to
networking. As someone said to me at university, your net worth is your network. Welcome back to the Sports Dentistry podcast. It's fight week, Umar. Fight week. We've got the big fight on Saturday night. Crawford against Canelo in Las Vegas. We've also got a big stadium fight in Belfast happening as well. Crocker against Donovan, and a few of the undercard fighters will be athletes I would support. But the big fight night is really Friday for our second conference of the UK Sports Dentistry Association.
Yeah, what an exciting weekend it is. And, we're only a few days away and the excitement is building. The program's come together very, very nicely. And we've just been speaking off air about how good it's going to be and how much effort we've put into this event, and with the speakers and with the venue and with the international cricket that we're going to be watching as well. Hopefully the weather plays its part and we can get the full game in. But I really think that this will hopefully take the UK sports dentistry to the next level with respect to how others around the world are viewing us and how we're trying to go about things and doing things slightly different from maybe other associations. We were trying to do a half-day conference and a dinner and then a sporting event like we did last time. So as the momentum builds, we'll try and get as much, videography and photography of the day so we can show our colleagues around the world just how we're doing it here. And, hopefully we can get some more international delegates. I know there's a few coming this year. We've got someone coming from Australia. We've got some people coming from Europe, some people coming from North America, I believe. So it's good. We're getting really good traction and it should be exciting. How do you feel about things?
Looking forward to it. I have a big decision to make. Still a few decisions to make, but one of the big decisions still to make is how many bottles of wine do we have to put at the conference dinner ticket? Because it's tricky. It's tricky more because the last time with the conference dinner was in the evening after, we spent the afternoon, but our conference dinner is a little bit early this time because we're going to the cricket. So it's these difficult decisions, they talk about the stress coming up to the event, and these are the types of difficult decisions that we'll have to make.
Well, as long as we don't get a repeat of you from last year, as we were leaving, having about 8 or 9 bottles in your hand as we were leaving, and you were saying, well, we paid for these, so we're going to have to take them away with us.
I think that's a very good reason. Now, I did donate them to the students that were there because they were having a student party the next day. So I thought that was very, very good of us because, as you said, we'd already paid for it. There's no point letting it go to waste.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Or letting the venue resell them the next day for the next event.
That's true. Well, it is an early start this year. It's 3:00, isn't it, the dinner? So, and then we need to be at Old Trafford for about 6 years. So it is still enough time. But, I think the important thing with that is, like you say, it's going to be quite an intense day with the lectures and the speakers. And then that'll be a really good time for us to network with the delegates that are there and really connect. And we've talked about a lot of times, that's where, dreams can happen, like the dream of the podcast when you mentioned it last year and I didn't let it go. And then we reconvened on the Saturday morning. I said, oh, John, remember you were talking about last night about doing a podcast? Well, we're going to do it. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? So I think, the people will meet new friends, will meet old friends. We can see something magical can happen from it.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think the networking is one of the best bits of the conferences for me. The small conversations that you have, and you're having your tea and coffee, and when you meet people, and I think that's the stuff that sort of creates ideas and innovation, and where you learn a lot from each other. But we do have a really good educational part as well. The focus of the last conference was an oral trauma in the athlete, and we're focusing on this time on oral health in the athlete, and we have a range of educational presentations that'll cover that, from our good colleague Annie Seaborn giving her experience in sports dentistry to Rebecca Robinson, who's a sports medicine doctor that works with cricket as well as other sports as well. So she's going to give us a great insight into how the sports medics support the athletes. Not so much from a trauma perspective, because we kind of covered that in the last conference when our good friend Andy did the concussion piece for us as well. So, but this is more going to be around general health and own medicine. And then in between that, we've got some great lectures from sports nutritionists on how they're fueling athletes, from Julie Gallagher that has that PhD in screening athletes and looking at the overall health of elite athletes. And a really interesting topic is going to be one of our master students who's just qualified, due to graduate next year, Imogen Johnston, who looks at, her background is in aesthetic sports and the ballet, and she's looked at the overall health of aesthetic sports, and maybe it's an area and sports has been a little bit overlooked. So that's going to be really interesting to see what's going on in that area.
Yeah, it's really, wide array of speakers and very experienced. And you said Julie Gallagher there, who's, whenever you talk about GOATs, she's one of them in terms of what she's done in the field and the research that she's done and the PhDs that she's done as well. So, and she's really, really nice. I've got a lot of time for Julie. She's always been very, very kind with her time and chatting to her and giving her experiences and giving you a helping hand about what to do in the sports dentistry world and what she's doing next. We've done well with the speakers, and also the Q&A with the athlete and Elizabeth Craik, who's gonna come up, who was on the master's program before, but then we know that she was offered a professional rugby contract, and then she took that, which is great for her, because we've said many times that most of us just field athletes, but she's actually doing it now, and she's actually living the life that a lot of us would love to have lived. And it'll be really interesting to hear her thoughts and how things are going for her professionally, what her thoughts are in dentistry, when she's going to get back into the dentistry. We've obviously had Abta Maksud on talking about it in the cricket sense, and she might go back to it too, but it'll be really interesting to hear Elizabeth's take on it, especially when she was doing the masters and then had to stop doing it. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot for it for the delegates. I think it will be something that hopefully they can walk away from and think that was a brilliant day. It was everything that I hoped it was and more. And I want to tell people about it, and I want to get more people to come next year. We've obviously not decided where we're going to do it next year or what sport we're going to do. That's something that's going to be up for discussion, but I think we just need to keep trying to get better and better and better. And I think at the moment, there's no real nerves. I think everything seems quite under control, but I do think when it comes to kind of Thursday night when we meet, and then on the Friday morning when we're just trying to welcome the first wave of delegates, and we'll have our boutique stand, we'll have Chris Coach's stand with his mouth guards, and it'll be fantastic just to see how the day goes. I think the pressure will be off at 3:00 when we're sitting at the table having something to eat and getting hydrated.
Getting hydrated. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the chat with Elizabeth. It seems to be, particularly because the Women's Rugby World Cup's on at the minute, and I've been watching a lot of the games, and I'm actually looking forward to this weekend, because it seems to be just where maybe the men's were whenever they were turning professional. The women's, there's some countries quite far ahead of other countries, and there's a few blowouts in the group stages. Last weekend, there's a few more competitive games as some of the top two teams of each group sort of ended up meeting each other last weekend. But now we're into the quarterfinals, and we've got sort of 8 really competitive games, and even the weekend afterwards, I think the 4 top teams are all going to be very, very close. So when the 4 teams that get to semi-finals are really going to heat up. So it's going to be really interesting to chat with Elizabeth. I know she dropped out of the Masters at the time because she was trying to focus on getting on the England team for the Rugby World Cup. So it'll be interesting to hear that. And she is a professional rugby player. She's playing a match on the Saturday. She's playing with Saracens, which is actually our guest for this podcast, Professor Peter Fine's club, and they're playing Sale on the Saturday. So she's travelling up a little bit early to come and have a chat with us. But it's really interesting. We'll be able to see the day before her match, how she prepares and how she's able then to focus with putting this. So it's almost like we've added something into her routine that she's not used to, and how she's able to adapt to that as well. So it's going to be really interesting Q&A with the athlete this time, particularly slightly different than the last time where we had athletes that have had dental experiences where they've been able to talk about how much they benefit from the sports dentistry support, where this time we actually have a dentist that's put dentistry possibly on hold or just keeping it at bay there until she finishes off this dream of being a professional rugby player.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to hearing her speak and how she's managed to fit this in. Like you said, it's slightly off her schedule. Like she wouldn't be used to maybe having to travel and commit to something like this a day before a match because normally they're so focused and they have the routines of what they would like to do. So hopefully we don't disrupt her. But I think she'll be excited to talk about her journey because there'll be people in the audience who may be in a similar situation or have had a similar situation where they had to make a decision and maybe they end up choosing dentistry instead of the sport. So yeah, it'll be good. And I think that leads us on quite nicely to the guest that we've got on for this week. And, you know, who better to get than someone who is the chair for the UK Sports Dentistry Association and someone who we know very, very well and who runs the master's program in sports dentistry at the Eastman and the restorative program as well as Professor Pete Fine.
We've been looking to get Peter on for quite a while, especially because he's done so much work in the UK. I spoke about it before that whenever I tried to get more into sports dentistry when I came back from Australia, the only sort of educational option there really was in the UK was the CPD course in UCL, and how he was running that at that stage, and that's 15 years ago, and how he was able to develop that then from a CPD course into a master's program. And I've been very fortunate enough to come on board to help out with the teaching of that program as well. So he's been really instrumental, I think, to sports dentistry in the UK. He's one we talk about Julie Gallagher, and we've talked about Professor Ian Needleman that really did a lot of good research around the London Olympics that really helped propel sports dentistry out of just the shadow of maybe just old trauma. But also Professor Peter Fine has been really one of the leaders in sports dentistry in the UK, and like we both know it from our experiences. And he's also now helping out with the UK Sports Dentistry Association, and he's chairman at the moment. So I think it's a perfect timing to get Peter on with the conference coming up this week.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Peter's quite good because he's so knowledgeable and he's got a lot of experience and he has worked and volunteered at many major events, and we'll hopefully get a bit more insight into what he's been up to and how he got into that and kind of his experiences to date. And we want to know a little bit more about the master's program because I know that's been on hold for a little bit, but hopefully he'll be able to give us a bit more of insight to that, and hopefully that's going to relaunch again next year. But we can get him on and ask him.
I'm looking forward to this chat, so let's go. Hey everyone, save the date. The UK Sports Dentistry Association's second conference is happening on Friday the 12th of September at the Voco Hotel in Manchester. And guess what? It's not just about teeth. We're combining cutting-edge sports dentistry talks with the thrill of live sport. Right after the conference, we're heading to Emirates Old Trafford for the England vs South Africa T20 International. Expect a day packed with expert speakers, athlete Q&A sessions, and plenty of time for networking with dentists, sports pros, and athletes alike. Whether you're in dentistry or passionate about sport, this is a day you won't want to miss. Tickets are live now at sportsdentistryuk.com. Grab yours and join us for an unforgettable day. It gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the podcast this week Professor Peter Fine. Thanks very much for joining us, Peter.
You're welcome. Yeah, pleasure. Nice to speak to you guys.
We thought it would be quite fitting to have you on this week with the second conference of the UK Sports Dentistry Association happening this Friday. But we'll maybe just start off, first of all, obviously myself and Umar know you quite well. But for our listeners, particularly for our non-UK listeners that maybe wouldn't know you as well, just give us a little bit of a background about how you got into dentistry and how that developed into sports dentistry.
Wow, that's a long story because it goes a long way back. I suppose I decided at the age of 15 that I wanted to be a dentist. So in 1970, I entered UCH Dental School in London as an undergraduate for a 5-year training program. And it was quite interesting how I got in because the interview panel at the time was about 6 or 7 different people. But as soon as they realised I was half decent at sport and they needed a new scrum half or winger or something, that was it. only had to get 2 A-levels, any grade, and I was in. But that was 1970. So quite a while ago now. And then I graduated from UCH in 74 with a BDS, and did a 6-month house job at the hospital, mainly dealing with trauma cases in A&E department. So that sort of has actually come back full circle, I suppose, in what we do with the sports dentistry now. And then I got into practice. And that was quite an interesting experience, because when I started to look for a practice, I realized that the principals that I was being interviewed by had a very different outlook on what clinical dental practice was compared to what I thought it was going to be. And that was quite alarming to me, because I was naive. I was 23 years of age. And it suddenly dawned on me that actually all they were interested in was making money. And all I was interested in was doing decent dentistry. And I just wondered how I was going to reconcile this and get a job. But actually it worked out pretty well, because I was having a drink with a friend one evening and met a local dentist in the pub. And he said he was looking for a new young associate. And so the next day I went to the practice, had the interview, and that was it. And the rest is history. So that's how I got into dentistry in the first place. So I joined the practice in September 74 early 75. Yeah. And then as an associate, and then after about 6-7 years, one of the principals in the practice retired, and I took his share over. And then the other one retired a good few years later, and I took his share over. And so became the sort of owner of the practice with a couple of associates working for me. And then my wife joined the practice. She was also a dentist, and she joined the practice. And so we worked the practice together. Actually, it's quite amusing, because the receptionist told us one time that a patient had phoned up and said, could she please see Mr. Fine? And the receptionist explained to her that Mr. Fine was on holiday. And she said, the patient said to her, well, in that case, I'll see Mrs. Fine. And the receptionist said to her, well, actually, they go on holiday together. So we managed to see and sort out the patient when we got back from holiday, as I remember. But what happened in terms of the sports stuff was almost by chance, I suppose, in that I got quite a few athletes, sports people coming in to see me, a mixture of professional footballers, golfers, rugby players, that sort of thing, coming in to see me for routine stuff, but the occasional trauma. And I did notice that they had a little bit more in terms of caries, periodontal disease, that sort of thing, than most of my patients had. And the other thing that I really found was interesting was that they could only come and see me at certain times. They were fairly inflexible. And I suddenly realized that this was largely down to their training programs, that they were away training or busy training, playing, traveling to matches and so on. So that sort of sparked my interest, if you like, in the sports dentistry stuff. Fast forward a good few years, I did a course at the Eastman in about 98, a restorative course. And then when I finished that, I then started teaching on that program, the restorative dental practice program. And the idea was put forward that we could perhaps expand the CPD course that was running on sports dentistry, and that I would be able to take that on and expand it. And then I had the idea of developing it into a full MSc, which took a couple of years or more, 2.5 years actually, to gradually get organized and get going until we know what it is today. So that's how I sort of got into dentistry and sports dentistry, if you like.
That's great. I'll maybe just take you back to something that you mentioned at the start, where that you were playing rugby as a scrum half or a wing half. Can you maybe elaborate on that, on the sport that you would have partaked in yourself?
Yeah, well, I didn't play a huge amount of rugby at school. I played a bit more at university, but that they just made it quite clear that if I could play, then I would get in the team. And it was, in those days, it was very much like that. You know, if they needed a new winger or scrum half or whatever, and you were halfway decent, then you got in. And it didn't really matter too much at the time about your academic achievements. Although I guess in hindsight that they thought they could make a clinician out of you. So they were able to assess it quite well in that way. Most of my sport as a schoolboy was football, because that was what the school played, mainly football, although the sports master was very keen on rugby. So that's how I got an interest in that as well. But most of it was football. And I played from the age of about 6 through till 20. Actually, I played till I was about 22. And then I literally playing rugby one day, I smashed my back up and ended up having to have some major surgery to repair that. So that sort of ended my rugby career. But I did play a little bit of football after that.
And then how did, I know you went into rugby referee, and how did that develop then from your playing?
Well, what happened was my son, the school he went to was purely rugby school, and he got into rugby in a big way, and he was quite good. And what happened was that when he got to about the age of 9 or 10, he joined the local rugby club, which was Saracens, and they sort of asked me to do a bit of fitness training with the boys during the season and pre-season. So that's how I sort of got into coaching a bit of rugby. But then when he got into the under 21 squad, I realized I was out of my depth and there was no way I could be coaching under 21s. And so I decided after a season, I think, without anything, that I missed it so much that I'd get into the refereeing. So, because then I could pick and choose when I had a match. I didn't have to be available every weekend like you have to be when you're coaching, as you will know, John, for sure. So the refereeing seemed really to fit the bill in many respects. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. I refereed for about 15, 16 years and got all over the country, really. In fact, abroad as well. I did a university tournament in Italy one time, although I think most of the players were more keen on drinking red wine than playing rugby. But it was quite an experience anyway. And that's and then I stopped refereeing a couple of years back when I realized that I was slowing up and the guys were getting far too quick and far too strong for me. I suppose if I can tell you one story as far as that's concerned, I used to love doing 7-a-side tournaments and 7-a-side rugby refereeing and playing. And one day I was doing a tournament, pre-season tournament, and the England Sevens team had a squad in the tournament, and I got to do 3 of their pool games. And that was such an honour to be on the same pitch as these guys. I mean, they were just so good and so quick. I got a bit of a telling off from my coach because I couldn't keep up with them. But then when I suggested he would be doing the final with them in it, he realised he couldn't keep up with them either. So, that was fine. But that was one of the highlights of my refereeing career, to referee the England team.
I think when it comes to refereeing in rugby, the level of respect is so high, isn't it? So you must have felt quite comfortable being in that environment, because we only hear stories about referees in the football game, the soccer game. There's just a lot of parents at the side who shouting and screaming when their kids are playing. But when it comes to refereeing in rugby, there's just that level of respect, and you can see it on the international stage. So I assume it's very similar to the kind of age groups that you were involved with?
It's similar. I have to say, Umair, that one of the reasons that I stopped, apart from the sort of fitness aspect, was that I was getting concerned that particularly doing junior rugby on a Sunday or something, or midweek even, a school match, that some of the parents on the touchline were getting a little bit abusive, thought they knew the laws of the game better than the man in the middle did. And I found that was slightly disappointing. It wasn't the only reason that I stopped. As I say, the fitness aspect was the main thing. But I was just getting a little bit concerned that can I call it a soccer influence was beginning to sort of rear its head a little bit. And that worries me. And it continues to worry me, really, because you're right. referees, rugby referees, men and women, have been hugely well respected throughout generations of the game. And I think if we lose that, then that's going to be very disappointing indeed.
Yeah, you can see it even in the, like you just mentioned about women referees. Like I was a little bit surprised about how many women referees are doing the current Women's World Cup. I think it's been all women referees so far. It just shows you how far that's developed as well. So really interesting.
Yeah.
It is always something that really stands out when it comes to rugby, is even though it's so physical, such a battle on the pitch, whenever it comes to the referee getting involved, that everybody gets really respectful and everything goes through the captains. It's something that's talked about in other sports, even in the Irish sports, about how that's a good example on how things can develop from that, because you have the complete opposite when it comes to soccer. It seems that they can say whatever they want to the referee and nothing happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, John. I think one of the things that I found when I was refereeing was to have empathy with the players. And I think by having played a little bit, that came fairly naturally to me. But I think the other aspect is to have a sense of humour. And by having a sense of humour, you can take the sting out of a situation that might otherwise have escalated. So, for example, you're doing a game. Obviously, the level I was doing, it wasn't anything like TMOs or television cameras recording things. It was, amateur rugby. But I would be watching the team moving forward. They thought they'd scored a try. I couldn't see the ball being grounded, so I'd sort of just make the sign of a TV screen like they do and pretend to go to the TMO and say, "No, I've looked at the tape, no try, ball held up." And they looked at me like, to start off with, like I was a bit crazy, but then they smiled and laughed. And as I say, it just took the sting out of the situation completely, and we got on with the game.
Yeah, that's actually good.
Yeah.
Maybe why Nigel Owens got so successful, because he always seemed to add a wee bit of humour whenever he was laying down the law.
Yeah, he had some fantastic lines when he was refereeing. But yeah, got a great deal of admiration for Nigel Owens for sure. Yeah.
You'd said that you'd been asked to take over the sports dentistry program. So was that already in motion before you got your hands on it?
It was, in a very simple way. There was just a few days of CPD run by a chap called Barry Shear, who was actually really into boxing in a big way. He was a paediatric dentist in London, and he really loved his boxing. And so he put together just 2 or 3 days of CPD training for dentists, looking at basically injuries in boxing. And then I picked it up and we turned it into a 12-day, once a month program over a year. And from then on, developed it. John came on board and we developed it into the 3-year part-time sports dentistry, oral health and sport MSc that you've been involved with, Umair, and John's still involved with. Yeah.
So how was that jump from the 12 days over the year CPD to the MSc? You said it took you about 2.5 years. What sort of stumbling blocks did you come across? If there was other people who are wanting to try and do something within their own countries and they're trying to think about it, like what sort of advice would you give and what sort of stumbling blocks were there that you had to kind of overcome to make it into this 3-year part-time master's program?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any competition from overseas, that was for sure. But what had to be done, and this is a sort of how universities work, is you have to go through a process of developing a curriculum, developing ideas about how you're going to teach, how you're going to deliver the program. You have to have ways of knowing what modules you want, how many modules each year, how many credits each module is worth. And doing that takes time, clearly. It's not just like you say to the university, I want to run a master's program on sports dentistry. They go into every single aspect. And they even insisted upon getting their marketing people involved and putting out feelers as to how successful it would be. Problem was the marketing people came back and said, well, this is not going to work because no one else is doing anything like this. And I argued that that's exactly why we should do it, because no one else was doing it. And eventually, as you know, it took off about 7 years ago, I suppose. But it goes from one committee to the next committee to the next committee. And finally, over a period of years, it gets passed. It then takes quite a while. We decided to make this an online course so that people didn't have to come into the university. They could listen to the lectures online, and they just came in for 1 week a year and did the practical hands-on skills training in our skills labs. So we had to video all the lectures, and that took quite a while because, as you know, doing this sort of podcast, there may be some editing to do and cutting out and what have you. So it takes a while to develop a slightly different technique in terms of lecturing to a camera as opposed to lecturing to a room full of students. And then, of course, that had to all be saved and put online. And then we had to work out how we were going to distribute that, what time intervals that would go out. And then, of course, plan the practical stuff, which was probably the easier bit because that's what I was doing when I'm working on the restorative program, planning practicals. So it sort of came fairly easy to me, I suppose. But yeah, it's just a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of committee meetings to go to and try and persuade people that this is a good idea.
I remember back when I was doing the CPD, when it was still like 1 day a month, I was very fortunate that it happened a couple of years just before the London Olympics, and how then that when they needed dentists to support, particularly sports dentists to support field of play, that it really was beneficial to have done the CPD. Have you noticed that having the London Olympics in around that time and a lot of the research that came out of it, did you find, first of all, what was your experience of the London Olympics, and did you find that really helped propel sports dentistry in the UK?
Well, my experience was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I'd never been involved in a major sporting event like that before. And for me, it was just sensational. It really was. I was involved in the copper box, which is where the handball and the fencing was on. We didn't see any problems with fencing, but there was a few bits of trauma with handball, that was for sure. But it was a fantastic opportunity for research. And of course, when we think of that, you can't help but think of Professor Needleman's work, which sort of really kick-started the world in terms of listening to research about sports dentistry. Prior to that, what had happened at Olympic Games was that the medical committee of the IOC had really just collected data. You know, how many people had visited the medical center, how many people had seen a dentist, and how many fillings they'd done or something like that, or how many teeth they'd extracted. And that was about it, really, in terms of data collection. But Ian's work in 2012, which was published then in 2013, looked far deeper into it. And they looked at over 300 athletes from all over the world and discovered that actually, to our surprise, all these athletes had similar oral health issues. Didn't matter whether they came from America or Albania. They still had similar issues. And so this common theme of higher levels of dental caries, more periodontal disease, certainly more gingivitis than the equivalent population, was really interesting. And it sparked this sort of huge interest in research in sports dentistry that we've continued with at the Eastman, but of course lots of other people now have picked up on it and are doing some really valuable research around the world. So I think 2012 was a huge moment in the history of sports dentistry. And I still refer back to it from time to time because I know it's 13 years ago now, but without that initial research, it just wouldn't have taken off the way it has done now. But I think what's happened is that we realized at that time that there was no particular sport and there was no particular country that was worse or better than anybody else. It was really globally a problem and throughout all sports. So from the 2013 study, for example, there are more track and field athletes visiting the medical centre for dental treatment than any other sport. But that's primarily because there's more track and field athletes at an Olympic Games than there are other sports anyway. So pro rata, there was probably about the same number of track and field athletes as boxers, wrestlers, basketball players, etc.
Yeah, and I think between 2012 and to now, you've been lucky enough to be involved with some other big games like Commonwealth Games. You know, Birmingham, you were there. Azerbaijan, I'm pretty sure you were there as well. Glasgow, were you at the Glasgow Commonwealth Games as well?
I wasn't in Glasgow. I went to, it's about 7 years ago now. I went to Turkmenistan,
Turkmenistan.
which is an interesting country, not to be put on your holiday list. I wouldn't recommend Turkmenistan as a holiday destination.
Although Umar does like the sun, so like I would say it's pretty hot out there, is it?
It was quite warm, as I recall, but it's a pretty hostile environment in terms of our visas. We had to have a visa to go there, and the visas wouldn't let us outside the athletes' village. So we've got very little chance to actually explore Turkmenistan at all. But for me, I was the only dentist there. And then the second week, one of my students turned up to support me. But being the only dentist there, I got literally to do everything. The sports medic who was in charge was at the time the sports doctor at Saracens Rugby Club, and he was at UCLH as well. And I met him, and he basically said to me, look, I don't know anything about anything from the neck up. So anything from the neck up, you deal with. And that was quite a surprise for me because I expected to be repairing a few chipped teeth. But in the end, I was ringside. I was putting unconscious kickboxers and boxers and so on, Muay Thai fighters into recovery positions, bringing them round when they were unconscious. I was then taking them back to the medical room, wiring up fractured mandibles, all that sort of thing. Lots of soft tissue injury stuff to do as well. So I got thrown in at the deep end, well and truly. But what a fantastic learning experience. And we've worked together since then, Tim and I, and it's been a very, very enjoyable experience. I was in Birmingham as well in 2022 for the Commonwealth Games, and that was good. Birmingham was good. The only thing about Birmingham was that I'd been asked in terms of helping organise the dental side of things, and I supplied a list of materials that we would need in the three venues. So there was the boxing where you were at, John, the basketball where you were at, Umar, and hockey where I was. And I'd asked for certain materials to be supplied, and they just weren't. So once again, that was an interesting learning experience because we just had to adapt and to fit in with what we had. Because although I asked for some, for example, splinting material to splint traumatized teeth, that never appeared. And I ended up adapting Steri-Strip with some bond and managing to use that as a splint. So, it was, once again, it was good. It was busy. I suppose the other thing with Birmingham was that we probably should have had 3 more dentists in the team, because there were days when I would be doing a shift from 7 in the morning to 11:30 at night. And that's a long day. Even though you're not busy all day, you're just there all day. And that's a long time. I was ready for that beer at the end of the day.
Yeah, I do find it at them games, even just the travel time to get, because you have to give yourself that extra time to get through the security, and do being longer days than the actual hours that you're on shift. Those tend to take it out of you especially once you get into week 2 of the major competitions. It tends to become a wee bit tiring.
And of course, as you would know, John, the accommodation was not exactly luxurious.
Yeah, no, it wasn't fantastic.
In fact, I was taken right back to student days, because it was probably worse than the student days back in the 70s.
Yeah. I was surprised.
I had quite good accommodation. I was in student accommodation. It was one of the newly built ones, though, so it was actually quite nice setup. Where
John and I was pretty.
Oh, it wasn't
basic.
Great. But it's funny you should say that about dentists, because we did say that at the time, where we were very surprised at some of the colleagues who had done the master's program and and other programs with the year-long courses never got selected, or they weren't offered to go down. That was quite disappointing, and I certainly felt when I got there and introduced myself to the team on the first day with the basketball, it was like, okay, went around the introductions, medics and physios and whoever else there was, and then there was me. But then they didn't ask about your experience in terms of what you had done and what sort of side role have you done, what sort of further training have you done. It was just there was a guy who was a really nice guy who just literally finished medical school, and just because he did medicine, he was allowed to sit pit side in the 3x3. But then I was quite annoyed at the fact that he didn't actually ask the leader, the medical lead, didn't ask what was going on. So I think I messaged, could have been you, Peter, and John, and our friend David Connerty. I was like, what is going on? Like, is this what it's meant to be like? And Dave messaged back saying, no, just speak to the guy, let him know what you've done. And I had a conversation. He was like, oh, I didn't realize that you had this extra training. I just realized you're just a dentist, you just did teeth. And we've talked about that a lot on the podcast, where there's a lot of familiarity with that being said. And Fiona's said that quite a few times in London as well. So I think it's something where when we do go into these environments and we are in the bigger games, we've obviously got the Glasgow Commonwealth Games next year, which we're still waiting to find out what's happening with that. But when we get into part of these teams, is actually letting them know what training we have and what we can do. Because as soon as you say to somebody who's not part of a team where dentists are involved, I suppose they don't quite get the understanding of what we can bring to the table. How do you think we could help improve that? So when we do walk into these teams, should we go and approach the medical lead, or should they be told who's in part of the team and what training they have? Like, how do we combat that?
Okay, well, that's a huge question, Umair, but you certainly contacted me in Birmingham, and, I think once you had a chat with him, your experience was a lot better than it started off at, which I'm pleased about. In Scotland, you've been very, very fortunate with having James
Robson.
James Robson, thank you, who had bought into the idea of having a sports dentist on the team right from when Fiona very first started looking after Scotland rugby. That is really rare. It doesn't happen anywhere else. So we have a task to try and make our medical colleagues aware of what we can do and why we should be there. And I think there's a couple of ways that we can do that. I think firstly, when these events are on, we need to find out who the lead medic is and say, or, for example, if you go to Glasgow, you need to find out the lead medic. You need to say, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is my special training. I'm here as part of the team. And then they can't ignore you. I think the other aspect is that, and this is something that I do, is I actually teach on the MSc in sports medicine. And so these would-be sports doctors are beginning to learn now that actually dentists have got a part to play as part of the full sports medicine team. I don't think that we will ever lead that team. I don't think we need to lead the team, but I think we are gradually gaining respect. And it's very much down to Fiona and her relationship with James Robson. He's retired now, as you know, obviously, and I don't know if it's the same thing with his successor. But just to give you an example, when I say we, Ian Needleman and I developed a very good relationship with the doctor at England Rugby, and we would routinely go down there and do screenings for them before major tournaments. Now he finished a few years ago, and the new doctor in charge doesn't want to know, just doesn't see the value in having a sports dentist on board at all, even just for a pre-season screening, never mind being available on match days for potential trauma. So it is a huge task. I think we're gradually getting there, but we've got a long way to go before we are universally accepted by our medical colleagues. Can I just pick up on one of your podcasts a couple of weeks back? Because you interviewed Saul Converser, who did the CPD program, and Saul and I published a paper a few months back. And actually, UEFA the European governing body for football, have now actually recognised the importance of oral health and are asking us to work with them. So from that, I would hope that because football has a huge following, people think, well, if it's good enough for football, we'll do it. Then perhaps that's going to be a really key contact that we've now got and we're nurturing so that we can develop further our relationship with sports medics. But at the moment, it needs a lot of work.
I think it shows just the benefit, and we've spoke about it a couple of times in the podcast, the benefit of doing research and getting this data. We spoke about it with Emilio Canal when he was approaching FIFA about field of play sports dentistry support for the upcoming World Cup, and they didn't see the value on having a dentist field of play, and it was more down to the fact that we're not presenting the data. We're not maybe recording all the good work that we're doing, the trauma that we're seeing and that we're treating, and it's not getting back to the decision makers. And it's maybe going back to your point as well, Peter, about the need for maybe more dentists, the Commonwealth Games. And it only took me a few games before I realised that it was so important when we were recording our incidents that we were putting them down as sports dentistry incidents and not just dental incidents, because that distinguished us between what was happening at the polyclinic, what was happening on field of play, because post these games, the people look at the data. So when they're planning the next game, they say, how many incidents was there? This is the type of workforce that we need to be able to facilitate. So it's really important. That's a nice point that you've brought up about how that great research work that you and Saul did looking into the World Health of Academy players has got UEFA to have listen to the need, the sports dentistry need, and shows us an example where more of that is needed, whether it is in a major competition like the Commonwealth Games or where it's to do with a certain sport like soccer and rugby. It's trying to present the need so we can get that importance. And then that feeds into your experience as well, Lumar, if we're getting that importance from our sports medicine colleagues, maybe other sports dentists won't have a similar experience than you got initially whenever you started supporting in Birmingham.
I think the other aspect to that, John, is the link that we're beginning to develop with sports medicine conferences. And I think that is significant, because 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been invited as sports dentists to talk at a sports medicine conference. But now we are. And we're invited to talk at the International Olympic Committee Medical Congress before an Olympic Games. Obviously, the European Association for Sports Dentists talk at the European Sports Medicine Conference, which is coming up in just Dusseldorf in November, and then things like that. So I think we're getting there. I think we're making progress, but it's quite slow. I think the other thing to this is that, I'm not sure how we go about this, but somehow we have to persuade the medics of our value. And I think you're right. I think if we can show them data, which we can, about the impact of oral health, the impact of trauma on athletes, then perhaps that's a way to persuade them that we are a valuable asset to them. As I say, a member of their team, not we don't want to, usurp our powers too much, but certainly be a regular member. I think the other thing, sorry, just to finish that point, is funding. So, with things like the Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games, we go along very, very much as volunteers. People get the wrong idea. They think we're being paid to do it. We are not. It costs us to go to Birmingham, to go to Glasgow, to go, last year I applied for the Paris Olympics and I didn't get a role, but we found out subsequently that the French only wanted to employ French dentists. So that was fine. But I was working out how much it was actually going to cost me to stay in and around Paris for 2 weeks. And I think, that we're doing this as volunteers. It's not an inconsiderable amount of money to attend one of these tournaments.
Do you know what it is? I think, yes, it's going to cost money to do something like that, but see the experience and the stories you can tell from going to
Oh,
these
yeah,
places.
yeah.
I would I would hands down, like, that doesn't bother me. Like, financially, luckily enough that we're in jobs where we can earn decent, but to be able to go and do things like that and experience places like that,
Yeah,
maybe in the future there might be an opportunity to get some sort of financial kind of benefit out of it. But ultimately, like, I can look back at that time in Birmingham, and you guys were all there, and there was other friends there, and the people that we met, and the weather was just amazing, and it was a great stay. Everybody was in great form. You got to watch all this amazing sport live,
yeah, yeah,
and and yes, we didn't have to pay to go to the sport, but you pay for your accommodation. But we got to catch up in the evenings and have food and whatever else, and
yeah,
that's the sort of things that I think going forward for me now. I'm like, actually, if I can go for the experience because I can look back on it and think that was amazing, I can tell
yeah,
my family, my kids, and whoever else about it. That's for me. That's what drives me, and
yeah,
about trying to go it from what you guys have done, like yourself and John, and talking about the next generation of kind of sports dentists and how we can take it to that next
yeah,
level, because
yeah,
we're very much in a position where you know we've got to this level, but then how do we continue to improve? And that's why we started the UK Sports Dentistry Association, and we've started the podcast, and there's other people doing amazing things. So that's my kind of view on it.
yeah. No, I'm absolutely 100% with you, Umair, on this. We have to be prepared to volunteer for these things. And I think that the experience is so rewarding that, that's enough for me. I mean, I hope I can get involved in Glasgow next year, but I haven't heard too much about that yet. But I think one of the problems for the IOC, for example, is funding the medical supervision of athletes throughout the Olympic Games. I mean, it's obviously a very expensive thing to do. And I think we have to be aware when we're organising the dental side of it that there are cost implications. For example, you have to decide whether you're going to provide a mouthguard service at the Olympic Games, for example. And sometimes there's funding there to do it, sometimes there isn't. At London 2012, the initial chap who was organising the dentistry wanted to provide full range of treatment at no cost to all athletes. So, for example, if someone came in with an abscess on a tooth, he wanted the dentist to open the tooth up, irrigate the canals, clean it all out, put a root filling in, get them back a week later and put a crown on it. Now, that's really unsustainable, and I question whether we should actually be doing that. The idea is really to get the athlete comfortable so they can carry on and perform. I don't think it's appropriate that we should be completing the root canal work and providing the definitive restoration. But that sort of partly on costs was put to one side. But particularly things like developing a mouthguard service, that's, to me, that would seem a very appropriate thing to spend money on. But then, of course, they decide they don't because they realise they've got to employ a technician to make the mouth guards. They've got to have some laboratory equipment, that sort of thing. So sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But that's sort of out of our hands to a certain extent. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. We gain so much from volunteering.
Yeah, I think London was my first experience of major competition, and it was so well run, and they provided the full mouthguard service that's what I expected. I thought that was the norm. And then 2 years later, when I was in Glasgow, it was slightly down service. So it really does depend on the funding and the level of the games, whether they have that funding, and also the importance that they put onto that side of support for the athlete as well. So so we chatted about the forming the UK Sports Dentistry Association, and we've got the sports dentistry education through UCL. How have you noticed much change in sports dentistry over the years, and where do you see it going in the future?
Oh, well, let's take the first part of that first, shall we? I've seen huge changes. I mean, when I first came into it, I think probably 60, 70% of the lectures we gave were about trauma, and that was it. And then the other 30% was probably about prevention of trauma. So things have changed hugely, largely down to the work of Julie Gallagher, who looked at the sort of links between oral health and performance. We now know so much more about the inflammatory process and how that affects athletic performance, but also systemic health. And, if you're going to be an elite athlete, you can't really afford to have inflammation that might prevent you getting that gold medal. And we know that the difference between getting that gold medal and not can be 0.5%, 1%. And that could be down to your oral health. So this has been a huge transformation that I've noticed in the last 10 years. I think the other big aspect is that we're now looking at mouth guards, not just for protection, which is their prime objective. Let's be honest, but we're looking at them to measure impact. That was quite an interesting thing, because when the research started on this, there were some rugby players that had a patch behind their ear that was measuring impacts. And that proved to be rather unsuccessful, because it would either get torn off during the course of a match. Some players found it uncomfortable to wear, so took it off. I think the sort of general feeling about rugby forwards was that they didn't want to wear it. The backs were a little bit more keen to wear it. But then, of course, we were looking at ways of having some form of stable device to hold the sensor in. And the mouth guard, which is, if it's custom made, is pretty stable in the maxilla. And so I think that's sort of how that all started. And now, of course, we can monitor players' impacts. We have a say in whether they are getting too many impacts and they can be brought out of the game or out of training. So I think that, those two things, probably the link between oral health and performance and systemic health, and the evolution, if you like, of mouth guards into now providing a good stable base for sensors so that we can monitor players' concussion injuries and so on, is huge. As far as the future, this is a more challenging one, because I think those mouth guards with sensors will be more and more refined, so they become more comfortable to wear. So athletes, particularly rugby players, will be more inclined to wear them. I think the other thing that I'm looking at with one of my PhD students at the moment is using a mouth guard of some sort, not particularly a protective one, but to monitor changes of pH of saliva over 24, 48-hour period. And this is somewhere where the link between dentistry and electronic engineering is coming in, because this PhD student is designing the electronics. I've designed the mouthpiece, and we're looking at how we measure and how we monitor changes in pH and saliva over a 48-hour period. And that can have a big effect on athletes, because, with their nutrition and so on, we like to keep an eye on what their saliva is doing. But it will also have a huge effect on our restorative patients, in terms of, before we do a major restorative work, we see where their pHs are going at what time of day, and then we can perhaps influence that before putting expensive restorative dentistry into their mouths, which then gets destroyed by an acid environment.
Yeah, and what advice have you got to give to someone who's wanted to get into sports dentistry? So where should they look for advice? Where should they look for courses? Somebody approaches you and said, I want to get into it. What advice are you giving them?
Yeah, well, I think I suppose I am going to be biased on this one. I can't avoid being biased on this question. I mean, we run CPD courses. We've got a 2-day course coming up in a couple of weeks. So that's always a good starting point. I think the other thing is, of course...
That's at UCL, yeah?
UCL, the Eastman, yeah. I think the other thing is, of course, get them interested and involved in Sports Dentistry UK Association, because apart from the annual conference of the association, the big job for that association is education. And I know we're working on that. We're working at the website providing educational links and so on. So I think that's another valuable avenue for them to pursue. There are globally now many, many more sports dentistry meetings and courses. And so I think we can put people in touch with all sorts of things. I mean, the American one is an annual meeting that John and I have both been to. The European Sports Dentistry Association is another one. You know, we know that there's now sports dentistry associations in 50, 60 countries around the world, something of that sort. You know, I was in Lisbon a couple of months ago at their inaugural meeting. Great meeting, you know, lots of interest in Portugal about this sort of thing.
Can you give us any more information about the master's program and what's happening with that then?
Yeah. Okay. So the master's program is changing its format. I'm in a fortunate position in that I'm so director of the master's program, but I'm also director of our restorative program. Now, as you guys will know, some of the sports dentistry program in the year one is orientated towards restorative dentistry. They're repairing fractured teeth, you know, crowns, that sort of thing. And so what I've done is to combine the first 18 months of the sports dentistry program is now going to be combined with the first 18 months of the restorative program. And then those students who wish to go on and do sports MSc will have 3 modules at the end of year 2 specifically on sports dentistry. Those modules are going to be on sporting trauma, prevention, and the link between oral health and performance. And then in year 3, they will do a research project under supervision on a sports specific topic. So that's how it's going to work now. And I'm hoping that January 2026 is going to see the relaunch of that. I've been given indications that that's probably going to be the start date for that. So that's quite exciting that the new format is going to kick off in another 4 or 5 months.
So in that 18 months that's joint with the restorative and the sports dentistry combined, will people need to travel more to London, or how's that going to work?
Well, UK students will need to travel to London. Overseas students will get it online, as has been the case in the past. So it's going to work in 2 different ways. Yeah. Those that do it online will then come in for a 2-week period, probably 2 1-week periods, to do the practical work as it's been done before. But the ones who live in the UK will be required to come in once a fortnight, roughly, throughout the first year. And then that includes in-person teaching, lectures, seminars, tutorials, and hands-on practical sessions each day.
Okay, so once every 2 weeks you have to go down, and then the overseas would come in 2 1-week periods then.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just so people have information on it when they listen to this, they can have a bit more of an idea what's happening. So
I mean, the assessment aspect of it is also interesting to note as well, because this is a university-based degree, so you have to have assessments. You can't just give someone at the end of 3 years, you can't just give them an MSc. It's been nice working with you. Here you go. Here's your MSc. It doesn't quite work like that. So they have to have an assessment after each module, and that will be things like an essay. It'd be things like presenting cases. It'd be things like making a poster that goes into a sports hall about prevention, something of that sort, doing a systematic review of the literature. But all the assessments are geared towards the student learning more, not just testing their knowledge, but it's really about them having to research the topic that's in question. And by doing that, then they actually get to learn more and they get motivated towards the next stage. The final year, the MSc research project, is they have to write a dissertation about 10 to 12,000 words. And then there's a final viva to defend that dissertation. So that's how it's going to work. And it's a well tried and tested format that I use on the restorative program and I'm now using on the sports dentistry program.
I know I'd let you more lead that, because as we work together, Peter, I quite know, but I also see the side of the people don't maybe see just the stuff that goes on in the background, from putting the case forward to the university, and how much effort that you've had to put in over the years to drive that sports dentistry course and take it from a CPD to a postgrad cert to a master's, and now the effort that you're putting in to keep it alive by reinventing, because as sports dentists, we're seeing it as a vital part of our education, that master's in sports dentistry, and it's important there, especially, we spoke about it before, about trying to get our sports medicine colleagues to value sports dentistry. And if there's MSc degrees in sports dentistry, they're more likely to do that. That's not necessarily how universities look at courses. They look at courses maybe in a slightly different mindset. To look at it as maybe from a business mindset, and they try to work it that way. So it's been really good, the effort that you've been able to put in the background to be able to reinvent, to keep the MSc Sports Dentistry alive in UCL. And I'm sure our colleagues from around the world they're trying to work with their own universities understand that the effort it takes. And I'm sure our colleagues in Portugal, when you were down there in Lisbon with them, they were able to understand all the work that goes into that.
Yeah, it is a lot of work, John. But you know what? At the end of the day, when I see students go up at graduation and get their certificate, God, it's such a proud moment. It is so worth it. It's worth every effort. But you're right. I mean, universities look at it very much as a financial perspective, really, and that's why they paused it, because it wasn't making them enough money.
Yeah, and it wasn't just to be clear, it wasn't just that specifically. It was quite a lot of courses, and on the university was looking at a bit of a revamp and to set a certain standard, and a lot of courses didn't hit that standard, so that's what caused the pause.
Yeah.
So we've been very generous with your time, Peter. I know it's been late at night, because I just don't know how you're able to function, because you always seem to be the first up and the last to finish. And I'm sure any of the students
Monday's a long day at work, so that's all right.
And I'm sure all the students that have been under your supervision over the years understand that, because you're sending emails and replies and giving them support every day of the week at all hours. But just to finish up, just from a personal point of view, is there anything that you're looking forward to coming up? Any sort of events, or sporting events, or sports dentistry events? Is there anything that, I know you mentioned briefly to me about how, when we're chatting about the lands, that you'd maybe be interested in going to the next lands tour in New Zealand. Is there anything like that coming up that you're looking forward to?
Oh God, yeah. Hang on, my wife's not listening, so it's okay. Yeah, I'd love to go to the Lions tour in New Zealand. My son would like to go as well, so I think that is a really important thing. But perhaps nearer to home, new rugby season kicks off in a couple of weeks, so I'm really looking forward to that. Going to see my team play, and hopefully a little bit better than last year. Actually, just as an aside on that, it's quite interesting. The Sports Dentistry UK conference at the end of the week, we've got Elizabeth Craik coming to the event, and of course Elizabeth was on the program as a student on the MSc program, and then turned professional rugby, so gave up dentistry for a career in professional rugby. And I thought, she came to me and said to me that she was thinking of doing this. What should she do? And I just said, go for it. Just go for it, because God, you don't get that opportunity every day, do you? To turn professional at the sport that you absolutely love. And
maybe it was that advice why she decided to sign for Saracens this year, was it?
Absolutely. I'm delighted she's going to be playing at Saracens this year. Yeah, I'm sure she'll add to the squad. But no, I think, yeah, what else am I looking forward to? I'm really looking forward, on a more serious note, I'm really looking forward to working with some new sports dentistry students and developing the research side of it. Because without the research, we just don't move forward. And we've already alluded to the fact that, the research that Ian Needleman did in 2012 absolutely revolutionized sports dentistry and really put it on the medical map. And so I'm looking forward to working with students and hopefully having some small impact on them in terms of their research.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much for your time, Peter. It's into the late hours of the day, so we'll let you go, and looking forward to catching up in person at the end of the week.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you.
Peter.
Nice to talk to you. I'll see you at the weekend.
See you in a few days.
Yeah, take care.
Right. Yes, Peter.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. We are delighted to have Ionate as a sponsor for the Sports Dentistry podcast. Are you looking for a water bottle that's built to keep up with your active lifestyle? Look no further than Ionate, the totally leak-proof water bottles with triple lock technology to prevent spills no matter where you're headed. With a simple one-touch opening mechanism, you can sip on the go without hassle. Plus, Ionate's sleek, modern designs are not only functional but can be personalized just for you. Made from high-quality steel, these bottles are easy to clean, and best of all, they're sustainable. From 320 mils to 1200 mils, Ionate has the perfect size for you, whether you're just out for a jog or going on a long hike. And it doesn't stop at water bottles. Ionate also has travel mugs and flasks to keep your drinks just right wherever you are. Ionate is the official water bottle supplier to the British and Irish Lions on their tour to Australia this summer, and are the official water bottle supplier to the NFL, so you know you're getting the best. I have been using their bottles for a long time now and cannot recommend them highly enough. So head over to www.ionate.co.uk to get your hands on the best bottles in the business, bar none. Now back to the pod.
We probably could have spent at least another hour, if not two, talking to Peter. He's just had so much experience, and there's so many areas that we could have touched on there.
Yeah, I don't even think we touched the surface, to be honest. He kind of dipped in and out of the things that he has done and what he's been up to and his experiences that he's had. But there's only so much time on the podcast that you can chat to him. So the opportunity will be there for people to meet him and speak to him at the conference on Friday. So I would urge anybody who is keen to get into sports dentistry or wants to do more of it or needs to have more contacts, he's certainly one of the people to ask. He is very knowledgeable and he's very approachable as well. And he's been in the game for a long time. He's seen a lot of changes and he is open to the fact that, things are starting to change and, the younger generation of sports dentists are maybe trying to take it a little bit further with, using social media and things like that. And he'll admit it himself, he's not one for social media, but I think, as an academic, he's exceptional in what he's done. And the fact he's managed to get the master's program to where it is now and getting you involved with that too is great. And to hear him say that it's coming back out next year as part of the restorative MSc, I think is really, really good. I think some of the feedback that we gave as delegates on the master's course initially was that I think we could do with a lot more interaction and being part of something like a restorative program as well. We can only benefit in it. I think it'll raise the profile more as well for people to get involved and say, actually, I do want to do sports dentistry, but then what am I going to get out of it in terms of the restorative aspect of it? But because they're going to be going together, I think it will probably open a lot more doors for delegates to get involved. That's just my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, I think it's a smart move. It is. I tried to touch on it there. The universities sort of look at from very much from a business point of view, and I think that they were looking at a lot of courses, how to hit so many students every year, and then the difficulty with sports dentistry, it's quite niche, and it's a little bit different than deciding to go in and doing a master's in orthodontics or endodontics or periodontics, and you're coming out and these are recognized specialities, and you can call yourself a specialist, and you can start getting a financial return on your investment quite quickly that way. But sports dentistry isn't there yet, and we know ourselves just from doing a lot of sports dentistry, it's hard just to even, when we especially working with elite athletes, to get any sort of financial return at all. A lot of the time we're volunteering and getting things out. So it is really more of at the moment, more of an interest thing, and you'll know that from yourself more. So, but then by combining that with the restorative, it's going to give you an opportunity then to take them skills as well, put them straight back into the practice and start getting a bit of a return on your investment, but also continuing down that interest niche. area of sports dentistry as well. So I think it's been really smart how we've been able to remodel, and it actually we spoke about Julie Gallagher earlier. It was actually a conversation between Julie and Peter with that idea. I think that was a conversation between Julie and Peter on the day of your graduation while we were waiting for the graduation to start.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's where the seed was planted, a conversation between the two of them, and it sort of developed from there. So, and we spoke about it before. It's the small conversations that things can grow from, and that's another example of it as well. So, I think that's been really interesting. But I think it's so important because it's very easy for people that are not in the field and people like business decision makers in academic institutes to say, oh, that's not hitting our business plan and we'll stop that course. And these are the sort of barriers sports dentistry have to overcome. If we were looking to grow sports dentistry, we would need to have academic courses, we need to have the ability to get a postgrad in sports dentistry. If we want to try to keep proving ourselves to sports medics and things like that, they're going to put more of an onus on if sports dentistry has these postgraduate opportunities. They're going to say, well, if universities are providing this education, then there's obviously something there where if that's not happening, it's really going to hold back our ability to grow sports dentistry. So important, and the work Peter's been doing to keep driving that at UCL has been really important for the educational part of sports dentistry in the UK.
Yeah, I know we talk a lot about luck on this podcast and how people experience a little bit of luck getting them to where they are and getting their foot in the door. And I think the master's program needs a little bit of luck as well. This could well just be that. Yes, there's been planning involved in it, and you said that Julie and Peter planted the seed and stuff, but to get it to where it is now, and the fact that Peter ended up becoming director of the restorative program, was able to then put it together. So that is a little bit of luck, because if not, then whoever was in charge could have said, no, we're just not going to do it anymore. So there's a little bit of luck there. And then you get the delegates coming through and they're starting to see a return on their investments and start to build that momentum. They start to see there's an association there. They start to see there's some online courses where they can do some sports related dentistry, and there's international associations where you can travel, you can see the world, you can meet other like-minded people. We're super excited that we've been asked to help in a couple of other associations around the world, and that's not something that I thought would have been possible. But with the luck of that conversation that we had about starting this podcast and meeting people from around the world who are willing to take us on and take our advice and help them has been amazing. So it's funny when you look back and you think, if that didn't happen, then that wouldn't have happened. It's like a domino effect. And you think like, well, everything happens for a reason, I believe, whether it's good or bad. So, but you need to put yourself in a position where that luck needs to happen. And that's where going to these events, meeting these people, speaking to people, networking. Always comes back to
networking. As someone said to me at university, your net worth is your network.
Yeah.
So it is. So it has been really good. Like the sports dentistry has grown a lot over the last few years, and the ability for us to set this pod up came from us having a conversation the same way Peter and Julie had the conversation about revamping the MSc, and like I'm really excited for Freddie and catching up with Julie and Peter and yourself. It's probably a while since we have met face to face. Even though we're looking at each other on a computer screen regularly during the week. So it's going to be great catching up with everybody in person. And we spoke all year about all the different conferences, and they're going to come thick and fast now because we'll get Freddie overs, and then Dusseldorf be around the corner, and then we're going to hopefully have the launch of the South African Sports Dentistry Conference then in early December as well, a couple of weeks after Dusseldorf. So there's going to be thick and fast as we run into the end of the year, and really looking forward to Friday and building on what we did great in Edinburgh. And so I said before, I'm not sold in the cricket, but I'll be representing South Africa there at the cricket on Friday night, so I'm expecting big things.
Do you know what? Actually, I need to actually get hold of my South Africa top as well, because I'm not going to be supporting England, that's for sure. No, but I'm a big fan of South Africa. I've been there, went there on a honeymoon. It's just the people, just an amazing place, lovely people. And obviously, with us getting involved with the South African Sports Dentistry Association, then we're going to have to support South Africa. Otherwise, our friends out there will not be happy, right?
And
But one thing,
we better support them in the cricket because they're not going very well in the rugby at the moment. Australia
no,
turned them over at their home turf, and then New Zealand just turned them over there at the weekend in Eden Park. So,
yeah, but they win when it matters, like World Cups. When it matters, they win.
well, the
So
matters to win. That's
so.
true. That's true.
But one thing I think I'm looking forward to the most is seeing new faces on Friday. People who haven't been to the or weren't at the conference last year and who'd heard about the conference this year and wanted to come. And I want to kind of know what brought them in. Like, how did they hear about it? What is it they want to see? Because I think those newer delegates are the ones that we need to get more information from, because obviously there'll be a lot of people that we know who will be there, and we've seen them at the European Association in Edinburgh, and then the UK one in Edinburgh. But the newer faces are the ones who I think who will help guide us kind of in the years to come about how we've managed to attract new people to come in. Is that because of the location? Is it because of the format? Is it because we're unique in terms of we dovetail it with a live sporting event as well? I think we still need to continue to improve and to look forward to what we can do next year. Yes, we don't know where we're going to do it yet or what the sport's going to be or how it's going to work. But I think if we can get an understanding as to what's brought new people in, then hopefully that will help guide us to bring in even more new people in next year. And hopefully when people around the world get to see what we've done and what we're doing and how it's going to run that day, and we'll get stuff up on the socials as the day goes on, and we'll obviously have our content guy there too, so we'll be able to get a good insight into just how it was run that day, just like last time in Edinburgh, which was great too. So that's kind of, I'm looking forward to that bit the most, I think, just because I want people to come up and say hi as well. Like, obviously they probably heard us on this podcast, so it'd be nice to hear their stories, and maybe it's something that we can share in the podcast. Somebody will have something really interesting, I'm sure, to share. So if you are out there and you do see John and I in our sports dentistry podcast merch, please come and say hello.
We've got the merch for Friday, the launch of the merch.
Yes. I'll be bringing yours down with me, so I'll just make sure it's nicely packed. It's actually all packed there just behind me, so it's all ready to come down. You asked for extra large, didn't you?
Extra large, yes.
Yeah,
have to be able to cover the kilt.
Yeah, but an extra small polo shirt is what you asked for, right?
Yeah. You gotta have it tight enough to where it cuts the blood off. So it makes your arms look bigger, but you know what I mean? So the blood can't drain back through your arms.
I think you're the guy that probably does about 100 press ups before you head out, just so you got that extra pump, so you got that extra pump, and then you put your polo shirt on. You're thinking, yeah, okay, it's going to stretch over my arms.
Then you're not able to lift your pink because your arms are too sore.
Yeah. That's when when I just start seeing you straight arming, I'm just like, okay, that's what's happening. Yeah, no, it's good. But yeah, do you want to just give the people listening who are going down any further information about timings and about parking and that stuff?
Yeah, so we're kicking off the conference. Registration is going to open from about 9:30 or slightly before. We've got some breakfast buffet. The conference isn't going to kick off till 10:15. The idea of that is that if anybody wants to travel in on an early flight or an early train that morning, it gives them time to get in so they're not rushed. Then we're going to kick off the conference at 10:15. About 12:15, we'll take a wee tea, coffee, networking break. And then we're going to get back at it at 1:45, and that'll take us through to 2:30. And then at 2:30, we'll finish up the educational part of the day. There's a wee reception drink then as they're turning over the room, and we'll have the conference dinner from 3 to 5. 5 o'clock, we'll start to work our way towards Old Trafford. So just for getting there, it's a 10-minute walk from Piccadilly train station if you're coming in that morning and getting the train. There's no car parking at the hotel, but there's a car parking facility opposite. I think it's a Q Park, but I'll be sending all attendees out an email regarding that this week. And if you pre-book it, you can get 25% off if you are for driving. Then when we're leaving the hotel and we're heading to Old Trafford, we're going to get the trams, and the tram tickets included with the cricket ticket. So you'll get your tram ticket during the conference dinner as well, and the tram will take us to Old Trafford and back to the hotel. So that's pretty it. Breakfast, we're going to kick off with a bit of a breakfast buffet at about 9:30 on Friday morning, and then it's going to be a great day.
Yeah, and I think for the cricket, you'll let us know what app to download because we'll need an app.
Yeah,
for-
I'm still to work it out. I think I can transfer it, but I've got all the cricket tickets. They all go through Lancashire Cricket Tickets app. So I just need to confirm. I'm going to try to confirm that with the ticketing office tomorrow. Does everybody just download the app, set up an account, and then I can use their email address, I think, to transfer the ticket to them?
Yeah.
I think that's the way it is. I just got to confirm that with the. That seems to be the most logical way. There was just a little bit of wording when I was downloading the app that made it a little bit strange, but I think that's you download the app and then I will be able to link in with your email address. But we'll work that out as we're going through the day. I'll put some information up just probably before the break at 12:15, give you a chance to download the app. And then around the conference dinner, I'll go around and make sure everybody's got their ticket for going to the cricket.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, yep, pretty well structured day. Nothing much more else to say other than go well.
Yes. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. And if you have any suggestions regarding the pod, don't be afraid to come up and let us know how we can improve and how we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we will be chatting away to folk on the Friday. But please come and say hi if you do see us. And yeah, we'll see you for an enjoyable day on Friday.
Looking forward to it. So I'll see you the next time I'll see you, Umar. I'll be in person.
It'll be in person.
In person. It's always dangerous when that happens.
It's dangerous. I've just actually Amazon delivering the AirTags tomorrow, so
Yeah, you gotta stick one in my back pockets.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you on Friday, my friend.
See you on Friday, buddy.